Representative Matt Gaetz entered material from Hunter Biden's laptop into the congressional record. Gaetz did this while at a hearing on oversight of the FBI's cyber division. In doing so, Gaetz sparred with the cyber division's assistant director, who admitted he did not know where the laptop was.
So where is it? The laptop?
Sir, I'm not here to talk about the laptop. I'm here to talk about the FBI cyber program.
You are the assistant director of FBI cyber. I want to know where Hunter Biden's laptop is. Where is it?
Sir, I don't know that answer.
John, what does this say about our DOJ when they give an answer like that to a story as hot as Hunter Biden's laptop?
Well, I think we've seen from the beginning with this, all the institutions, the Democrats, the government, they've all been colluding to suppress this story, to make sure that the American people don't know what was on that laptop. They don't know what kind of corruption was taking place with Burisma and all of these different, Ukraine. And I think it's really concerning. We're seeing more and more that these Democrats are not democratic. They really do see themselves as above the American people, and they don't need to disclose any of this.
Do we think that Hunter Biden is eventually going to get subpoenaed here?
Well, thank you, Matt Gaetz, for finally doing this. Okay, but the thing about it is, John said, everything has been suppressed by the media. I don't believe he is, because the story, as big as the story is, it still continues to be minimized to the point where most American people don't even know anything about Hunter Biden or his laptop or what significance this laptop has as relates to the 2020 election. And so when you start trying to have this conversation with people like, Derrick, what are you talking about? And that's because the media has suppressed it to that point.
Some of us, unfortunately, have too much of that in our heads right now. The Washington Post ran a story this week affirming contents inside the laptop and from Senate Republican investigations, specifically a $100,000 transaction Hunter Biden made with CEFC China Energy. This is essentially a communist China-run front company. Nikki, the coverage here has been so controversial because it really addresses the question of censorship. It addresses the question of what questions are we allowed to ask? And all of a sudden, they're opening the floodgates and they're asking it.
Right. I mean, when we saw the New York Times affirm this, when we saw the Washington Post, right, it's buried. It's like, toward the bottom of a 1,200-word story, right? So it's, yes, like, oh, mea culpa, but we're still going to try and sweep this under the rug. I mean, I'm so glad that there were copies made of the hard drive, because if this just got lost, then no one could do anything about it. And so, yeah, there's real censorship concerns. And, I think the big tech companies have a lot to answer for, right? Watching how Twitter tried to suppress these stories, watching how Facebook tried to suppress these stories to get it out there. Like you said, to keep it from the American people knowing about this issue.
We get the sense that they're kind of preparing for something. They're preparing for something more, and they want to kind of be seen on the right side of history here.
I look at, you talk about censorship, but the thing about it is with Biden and his son and with this, it's the whole energy, everything is tied back to energy. With Burisma, with Hunter Biden sitting on the board of the largest gas company in Ukraine, and Biden trying to shut down gas in the United States, but then you see the laptop has an email from a $100,000 payment going to China related to energy. And we look at what's happening in our country right now, and you got to wonder what special interest group, who has Joe Biden in his pocket so much to the point where he is so aggressively pushing this green agenda that is hurting so many people here in America.
Well, I think also we have to think about the political stakes, right? So obviously, when this story came out in the New York Post in October, there was an election. Big tech, the institutions, they're not going to let that happen. They're not going to let the Democrats lose. Now it's, it's March of an off year. So I think that's kind of where they're like, okay, let's get this out there. And as you said, when the next story comes down the pike and they're ready to censor that to make sure that Republicans can't take advantage of it, they will.
Well, all good points. This leads us to a very similar topic on the issue of Hunter Biden. He's had, as we all know, substance abuse, but the National Institute on Alcohol Abuse and Alcoholism revealed a staggering statistic. More adults under the age of 65 died from alcohol-related factors than from COVID. The study determined that more than 99,000 people suffered alcohol-related deaths in 2020, a 25% increase from the previous year. Panelists, what do we think of this, and how is this story so underreported on right now?
Well, we were all forced to be locked down in our houses for a year. It's little wonder that a lot of people turn to alcohol. I mean, I think there's part of it, right? We shut the economy down unnecessarily, and people had nothing else to do. They were lonely. They were isolated. And now we see in schools, as a result kind of this whole, the COVID stuff, students facing unprecedented levels of depression and sadness. And so their solution is we need more government to address this. And so unfortunately, I fear that this is going to be cover for the government to just, again, get in our heads and tell us what to do and pull the strings with our health care.
You bring up a great point, too, about the demographics of this. How many of those affected were kids in school? And how many of them maybe had access to things they probably wouldn't have had access to had they been in school, right? That is certainly something that we're not addressing now. You think that we'll actually look back on history and maybe be a little more introspective on the mainstream level?
Look at, this comes back to censorship. There was a very recent study done by Johns Hopkins University, very well-respected university, okay? And the study talked about the impact of COVID and the shutdowns, and it had on people's mental health, alcohol abuse, drug abuse, and it wasn't just from the United States, it was a global study. But again, the censorship, they've shut down this story, so most people don't even know about it because they don't want people to know the impact, the negative impact of the shutdowns it had on America and on a global scale as well. And so it goes back to, again, and the other thing that they do with this, with the COVID is everything is related to COVID as opposed to what it really was. Okay, so like the alcoholism right now, they're not going to say it was alcohol abuse, but it was due to COVID. Any kind of illness, it's not, a guy crashed on his motorcycle and was killed, but it was directly related to COVID. And so everything right now has been related to COVID, when it's unfortunate that we and the media takes us down this road, and we, through censorship, don't really know what's happening right now in America. A lot of times.
No, that's true. We'd certainly be paying a lot more attention to car crashes, for instance, if we had a daily tally of how many people were dying from that. President Biden announced this week that he will be releasing up to 1 million barrels of U.S. oil from the Strategic Petroleum Reserve. The White House says this is designed to combat high energy prices. Derrick, is that true?
Again, this is a ploy. Because we're coming up, what, 6 months, 7 months from the election, right?
That's a lot. That sounds like a lot of oil.
It sounds like a lot of oil, but at the end of the day, it's really not. It sounds good, though, because Biden needs a win right now because he's struggling so much in the polls. He's down with 30, he thinks he's 34, 35%. But he needs a win right now. And again, the sound bites, I'm releasing 1 million barrels of oil. It sounds so great to America. Oh my God, we're going to have some reprieve. We're going to have a relief from what's happening at the pump. But it's not going to help. Nothing's going to help until we change policy and get back to producing energy right here in America.
Right, we consume about 17 million barrels a day.
20 million barrels.
20 million barrels, and we only produce about, what, 15 million or something like that? So we have that deficit that we're still relying on.
Still relying on
other sources. You know, another thing that was fascinating I learned recently was the fact that we're still importing uranium from Russia, right? This is all having to do with the Clinton days, uranium one, but all of our nuclear fuel is still being imported from Russia. It's just, the contradictions are astounding. Panelists, thank you so much for joining us. A fantastic discussion, as always. Yes, always. It goes by so quickly. When we return, the 3 lies out of the Biden White House this week. It's amazing what they think they can get away with. Plus, Justine Brooke Murray speaks with Americans inside and outside the Beltway about inflation. Wildly different takes when we return.